Welcome, friends, to this episode of the Sync Your Life podcast. I'm excited to have my friend Karen Holden with us today. She and I have really bonded lately over the topic of health and wellness, but she brings a really unique element to health and wellness that I think is going to really serve you as my audience, which is she's really focused on helping people create sustainable change and helping them implement habits that will work for them, that will help them carry wellness journey all the way through their entire life, right? Your wellness journey is there's never an end point, right? As long as you're alive, you are on a wellness journey. So I love what she's doing. I love everything that she's up to. We've had a chance to touch base for a few minutes before the official call. And I know it's always a good sign when I don't want that conversation to end. So I have lots of things that I want to talk to her about today. We've got lots of questions to cover, so I want to dive straight in. But first, Karen, I just want you to tell my audience, a little bit about yourself. Who are you? And sort of what brings you here? What brings you to health and wellness?
Great. Thanks so much. I loved connecting with you too. So that was an awesome sign, wasn't it? I spent 33 years in the corporate world. Before that, I did do some fitness. I was an aerobics instructor back in the leg warmer days. And then got away from that, I think, as I worked through a career with Big Four accounting as a tax person. And in my retirement, and a little before that, I started to get really interested in why people just let go of wellness, why everything else becomes a priority, and why it's so difficult. And I was seeing in myself and the people that I worked with spurts of energy towards their wellness. The crash diet, I'm going to exercise every day. We'd go on a business trip and there they would be in the gym every day when I hadn't seen them there before. And then that would end. And so it was a sort of a cycle of wellness and not wellness. Yo-yo dieting is a great example of that. And so I just started to think, we're all smart people. Why can't we figure this out? Like what would it take to make it sustainable? So I started down a journey of different studies. I did a Cornell wellness program. I've studied with precision nutrition and just recently got my certification as a master health coach there, and started to discover what I feel like are the secrets to sustainable wellness. And it's really not that hard. I think it's just not so popular in media and on social media because it's actually fairly easy and therefore doesn't seem as sexy as some of the things you see out there. So as part of that, after doing the study, I've launched a coaching program and just love helping people kind of figure it out along with me.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know that when we talked before, we were both talking about the fact that, what is it that holds so many people back, right? Like, what is it? I mean, there are millions of books out there about creating sustainable habits, right? But people still seem to fall short. And I know for me, one of the most frustrating things is I work with a lot of women, and a lot of times they'll come to me and they'll say, okay, I'm ready to start my journey, right? You get those, a lot of times January rolls around and people are ready for that New Year's resolution, right? But what is it that makes some people stick and other people fall through? And the one thing that I've heard the most are these women that come to me and they say, I'm ready to do it, ready to take advantage of what you have to offer. I'm ready to really dive into these tools. And they'll say, what can I do to make sure that this lasts for me? And I always like to say, well, what is your goal? Like, what are your goals and what ultimately are you wanting? Because success is defined differently for everyone. And it's always interesting because so many women will start off saying, well, I think I have probably an hour to an hour and a half to exercise every day. And I think to myself, oh girl, like, first of all, you do not need that much. And second of all, if you have that much time, then we're really going to crush it because we're going to look at your nutrition and everything else. So I know that time seems to be the biggest barrier for people. In the beginning, they seem to think, I'm going to make time for this. I'm going to make time for my wellness. But then eventually I know it becomes the number one excuse, right? Like, well, I haven't had time for this. So what have you found as being sort of like the biggest barrier for people when it comes to finding time for their wellness?
I think a couple things, and you're spot on, right? Time, whether it's because I have a client obligation or because I have children that I have to take care of, or a husband, or other demands on our time, and women tend to put themselves last. And so I think the two biggest things are a misconception that it takes a lot of time. Like you said, if someone has an hour and a half, they think in their schedule to work out, they probably don't, and it will become the excuse. And that's tied to the idea of perfectionism. So if I don't take the hour and a half, If I don't do everything perfectly, I have failed and therefore I'll quit. So one of the things I start with working on people and women more than men, I think, is this perfectionist idea that they have to do everything perfectly in order for it to work. And it's interesting, there is research that if you even do 40% of what you planned, you will make progress. So my biggest mantra, and sometimes the place we start after figuring out our priorities and values, is to really let go of perfection. We talk about a continuum. So I give people an exercise to say, what is one small better thing I can do? So if you're going out to eat, for example, what's just one small change I can make to make this better? So maybe I pick the salad instead of fries and I still have the steak I wanted. It doesn't have to be a salad with lemon juice when you're out at a nice meal to make it healthier. And so it's really letting go of that idea. And then you'll find the time, because it doesn't take that long to actually do a few small steps.
Yeah, it's always interesting that when it becomes a priority and when you can establish that it's, something that you value, then you can make the time a lot easier. So I love that you start with values. When you're working with a client, can you kind of walk us through like what your process is? I mean, you just said you start with establishing what that looks like for them, what success in this looks like for them. But then from there, where do you go?
Well, I know you've done some life coaching. I listened to some of your podcast, your past podcasts. So I start there with the wheel of life. And you need to know what your priorities are, right? You can't prioritize everything. And if wellness or exercise isn't at the top of your list and you recognize that, you can figure out, okay, maybe I put that to the side or I don't do as much right now. So we really start with helping understand our priorities. And then once we've done that, I actually do a 3-day goal setting process because I want people to have the time to really absorb. And we break it down mostly into the wellness area, but other parts of your life as well, because if they're important. And then we break that further down once we have that into action steps. So I use a goals and then process where we break it down into really small daily action steps. And that's what we work on together. I usually love to have people, have you ever done a destination postcard?
No, tell me about it.
It's fantastic. I love to have people take these goals and write a postcard to themselves and maybe even do a vision board with it of, if I get to where these goals say I want to go, what's it going to look like for me? What am I going to be doing? Where am I going to be? How am I going to feel? And, tape that up on the wall where you can see it all the time. Put it on your computer. It's actually my destination postcard right now is my home screen. So it pops up and I put some pictures, I pulled off Canva, and it has, my mantras and the things that I want to get to. And I think when I find people are lacking motivation at the moment or feel like they can't go on. So that's really where the sustainability is, right? Some days you're on, some days you're off. Just take a look at that and remember what we went through and what your priorities are and where you want to go.
Yeah, you've said so much just in the last few minutes that I don't know where to start with where I want to dive in. But I think the one thing that I want to make sure we don't glance over is this idea of perfectionism. Yeah. It is something that has come up recurrently in what I do. I lead a team of health coaches as well, and we have a life coach for our team. And so the one thing that keeps coming up when we have our little mastermind sessions with my health coaches is this struggle with perfectionism. So it goes for our health and fitness. It can also go for women who are starting a business, right? We feel like for some reason, I think more, like you said, more dominantly in women, we feel like we have to do everything with like to a T, like perfectly in order to win, right? And I see it happen all the time. Like if someone is following a fitness calendar and they miss a day, then the whole thing just goes to crap and they restart themselves 2 weeks later, right? Or same thing goes for nutrition, right? They decide to go out and they splurge on that margarita and then it's like, oh crap, I'll just throw away the whole weekend. There's always that. I think there's a meme that floats around on social media that says like, for breakfast, I had egg whites with broccoli, and for lunch, I had a big salad, and for dinner, I had pizza, hot dogs, and it lists off like a million things that they just sort of let it all go. But this idea of perfectionism is something that I know I struggle with. I know a lot of women struggle with, and I want to touch on it just a hair more. I'd love to hear from you. What are some ways that you help women overcome that? I mean, you've talked about these, biting things off in smaller chunks, like having smaller steps of the staircase that you're focused on, but tell us more, I guess, about perfectionism.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people, don't let great get in the way of the good.
Yeah.
And, I think there's always a hesitation I see in the workplace in particular around raising your hand to say, I can do this before you know how to do it. And it's that willingness to jump in that you see often men will say, sure, I'll lead that group, right? I'll do that. I'll take that new challenge. And women think, I'm going to learn everything I can. And so one of the things I do is ask people to take a beginner's mindset. Don't try to read everything about the perfect workout or try to find the perfect diet. Let that go and take a beginner's mindset and just start. Even
Hmm.
if it's not great, I think we have to recognize that failure is really just data. There is no failure. It's just data points. When you fail, look back and see what you learned. I think some of those things help people let go, and certainly recognizing when you're falling into that perfectionist mindset. When you're saying, like you said, just like you said, oh, I had the margarita, so I might as well have four more. And now I'm going to eat all the chips and I'm going to eat the guacamole. And I was just in Mexico at a wedding. So I definitely was fighting that mindset the whole time. It's not easy, and recognizing it's not easy. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to do well. But when it's getting in the way of your goals, recognizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think there's so much to be said for this, because I think there are women out there. And like you said earlier, women wear a lot of different hats. We're moms. A lot of times we're moms, or we have careers, or we have spouses, or a lot of times we're helping care for our parents, or we're siblings. We have so many different roles that we play. And a lot of times I find that women are, like you said, putting themselves on the back burner, and they know that something's off. Like a lot of times women will say, well, I know I need to prioritize my health and wellness. Or in other cases, they'll say, I am prioritizing my health and wellness. I am exercising. I am eating right. But I feel like I just still feel off, right? Like I'm still not able to break that weight loss plateau, or I'm still not able to sort of get to the next level in my wellness. So I guess, we talk about this concept of like, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? You can't pour from why can I not say this? You can't pour from an empty cup. And so, but, I think women are just so stuck in this sometimes, where, our kids get the best of us, our spouse gets the best of us. And then at the very end of the day, we're sort of, I don't want to say last place, but maybe that workout doesn't get in, right? Or maybe
Right.
it does sound good to have that extra glass of wine. So mindset plays such a huge role in all of this. And so I think what you're doing by simply having these conversations with women, you're sitting down and you're making them aware. It all starts with awareness, right? It starts with the awareness of, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And I think the most powerful thing is, I've been doing this for 13 years. And a lot of times, unfortunately, women will come from the get-go and their goal is like a goal weight. They'll have a goal weight, or they'll have a body, they'll picture their body from high school or something. And they think that that's like their ideal of what they want to get to. And it takes a lot of coaching on my part to say, okay, I'm more interested in how you feel. Like, how do you feel? Do you feel strong? Are you able to keep up with your children? Are you sleeping well? Because those are the things that matter more so than, the way you look. But also I want them to see those tangible wins as they go along the journey. And so I think helping women see things as little wins helps them keep going, because if they are inclined to that perfectionism, they need that constant reassurance. They need that constant affirmation that what they're doing is working and that they're feeling better. So I'm not sure if there's a question here necessarily, but I think, when I'm really thinking about the clients that I've worked with, my favorite thing about being a health and wellness coach for myself is just, I love the transformation that happens on an internal level. A lot of times you will see, before and after photos, and they're great. People have lost weight, they've lost inches, they look incredible because they're nice and toned, right? Or whatever. But like at the end of the day, it's the confidence that you see in them. It's just this, it's almost more so who they've become than how their body has transformed. Right. And so I want to hear from you, like, do you see that as well? I know it's such a rewarding feeling as a health coach, but let's talk about confidence, especially confidence in women, and how these step-by-steps can lead to that confidence.
Well, success breeds confidence, right? And so I think you're exactly right. One of my main pillars is actually mindset. knowing you're not alone, and breaking down some of those myths that are out there. Instead of your goal, so the small pieces, instead of your goal being by summer, I want to weigh my original weight, which I always ask people, is that 7 pounds, 8 ounces? What are you going for? We're not going to get back the body we had when we're 25, and that's probably a good thing. We've been through a lot of things. So setting that mindset of those small wins. Let's not set a goal that's so unattainable we're going to give up. And let's have those successes, because the more successes you have, that just builds on itself. Thinking about your limiting beliefs. What do you believe about yourself? What are you able to overcome in that way? So a lot of women will say, well, I don't exercise. I'm not an athlete. I don't do that. I can't do it. So let's find something that you like to do that brings you joy in movement, and not think about movement as this slog through the gym. I love the saying, you'll when I say it, you'll be like, oh, you're a Peloton girl, which is, we don't have to do this, we get to do it. And to really remember that just the ability to move through the world is fantastic. Just that mindset. I know I've had some knee surgeries, and I lived in Manhattan at the time. And so I could sit there and look out my window at all the people walking around on the street, and it just drives home. I can't go do that right now, right? I can't do what most people in the city do. I can't like hobble to the subway and get somewhere because I'm sitting here. And so just remembering that you get to do it, and the mindset of the gym to, wow, look at what I can do. And finding joy in that, I think, is so important. And remembering all those small wins. The fact that you went to the gym, I always tell people, look, it takes 10 minutes for your body to change from a relaxed sitting state to I want to move state. So go do whatever you're going to do. Walk, ride your bike, ride your stationary bike, walk on the treadmill, whatever you're going to do. Set the timer for 10 minutes. And if you still want to quit. You've done enough. But I'll bet you 99% of the people keep going, because now your body's moved to the new state. So just sort of overcoming some of that resistance. But if you get off after 10 minutes, celebrate that too. I put on the clothes and I went and did it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I always say, the token saying, if we don't have our health, we have nothing. And it's interesting. I just had someone asking me last week. They're like, well, how did you get it? It was somebody that I went to high school with. And they're, in high school, I was very determined. I was going to go into book publishing. Journalism was my thing. And that is how I started out in my 20s. And I was talking to this person from high school, and we hadn't spoken for a long time. And they were like, how did you end up in health and wellness? And I said, well, I don't really know, but I know that from a very young age, I started experiencing my own struggles. Of course, that's dominantly why I'm here. But the way that I stay motivated and the way that I still tackle my own health and wellness journey on a daily basis, I think is rooted in the fact that when I was 12 years old, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and he was given 2 weeks to live. And so we went, our family dynamic just was turned on its head. He went into the hospital. My mom went with him. My grandparents took over with us, and I had to kind of grow up pretty fast, right? I became almost like a mom to my younger brother at age 12. And I saw what happens when and of course, cancer is out of our control, right? There are things that are out of our control, but I saw this sort of happen to my dad, who was otherwise healthy. And I thought to myself, I want to have as much control in my health as I can. Like, I don't want to, when I'm older, right? Like, I don't want to have anything. I was so scared. It was almost probably out of trauma for me, that I was so scared of sickness. And so I've always made it a priority. It's always been a priority for myself. But I think when I got older and sort of grew up out of college, right, having my own chronic headache struggles and having sort of, I wouldn't call it sickness, but having pain as part of my life, I was like, I have to do as much as I can in my control. So what you're saying, right, like coming back to this attitude of gratitude, right? Like, what do I get to do versus what I'm not able to do? And every day when I press play, I think of my dad, who's now still with us. And he uses a walker. He was chemotherapy, had some toxicity in his brain from that. So he kind of acts like a stroke victim, walks and talks like a stroke victim. And so I see him every day doing his very best, probably watching everybody, like you said, running by on the street and wishing that he could do that. And I think, how dare I not move my body today? Like, this body is a gift. And, if we don't have our health, we have nothing. The other thing that when you were talking, made me think, the very first time that I embraced home exercise, which is sort of my jam, was 13 years ago. My husband and I pressed play on a really intense home workout program, probably a little bit too intense for where we were starting. And we joke around now that we probably should have just popped a bowl of popcorn and watched it, because we were so awestruck by like the intense level of exercise that was happening. Now, we are the type of people who are wired for competition. It's like, so for us, it was like, oh, look at this. Like maybe we could do this someday. We just kept showing up. We just kept showing up in the basement to do it. But I also want to just encourage people that, like, if you're seeing, you're watching people on Instagram. I know a lot of us now are so into social media, especially coming out of the pandemic. We see everybody else's highlight reels. We see trainers on social media who are doing like one-handed push-ups and clapping, they're doing like a spin midair, like whatever they're doing, right? And we think, I want to be able to do, I wish I was that fit. And so, but then what happens is we start a program that might be a little bit too intense for us. And it makes us feel like we're failing. And so unless you are sort of intrinsically wired to just crave that as a challenge and to keep showing up and to keep making that happen for yourself, it's okay to start with something else. It's okay to start with, there's a lot of people out there. I always say, you got to find your soulmate workout. You have to find what it is that makes you, like for my mom, it's Zumba, right? I'd rather die than go with her to Zumba, but that's her thing, right? Zumba, or it's yoga, or it's Pilates, or it's walking, or it's running a 5K. Like everybody has their own thing that keeps them active. And I think that really is a key to creating sustainable change. Finding something that you enjoy doing with exercise, and finding a way of eating that doesn't make you feel restricted or doesn't make you feel like you are giving up your life, if that's not what you want. You know what I mean? Like if that's not a priority for you. So I want to ask you, what are your tangible tactics for creating that sustainable change in people?
So the first one is really small steps, and maybe we could talk about nutrition for just a minute. I know that you do a lot of nutrition work too. And the number one question I get is, what is the best diet? Mm-hmm. And I say, first of all, when you say diet, do you mean restricting yourself and losing weight, or do you mean a way to eat? Because I want to talk about a way to eat. And really, I'm very diet agnostic. If it works for you and makes you feel good, and gets you to your goals, I can probably support it. Now, if you tell me the all Snickers diet is doing that for you, I'm going to be skeptical. But I think that what I try to teach people is there's 3 base foundation habits that I think are super sustainable when it comes to nutrition. And they're really easy. It's just eating more slowly and eating more mindfully and eating mostly whole foods, less processed foods. And sometimes I'll throw in, add some vegetables, add a handful of vegetables to everything. But it's so funny. I was working with another coach, and she's Indian, and she told me, she said, there's an Ayurvedic saying that is, if you eat standing up, the devil looks over your shoulder. And I tell everyone that, and that sticks in people's heads. They said they'll stand, you're standing at the fridge with that spoon and you're ready to take like, oh, that leftover Chinese, and just start eating it. I always tell people, the devil's looking. So sit down and eat. And that really just comes to that slow and mindful eating. And for a lot of people, just having that habit, that small habit, which I kind of consider a minimum, I call them their BAMs, their bare ass minimums, at the ready, can keep this thing sustainable. Because I talk a lot about dialing up and down your habits. There are going to be times when you can't stick with all the healthy things you want to do. So you've got to yourself where you're eating mostly processed food, you're eating more plants, you're getting your workouts in, and then boom, a life event happens. You have a trip, a fun trip, a work trip. There's a health thing that happens in your family. For example, recently my mom had a small neurological incident that turned out to be fine, but I dropped everything and flew to be in the hospital with her. And then you can fall back to your BAMs, to your bare ass minimum. So maybe you can't do everything because you have to sit in the hospital, but you can walk around the corridors while they're having a test, for example. You can just eat slowly. You can use your what's one better thing I could eat, when you're looking at the vending machine, because that's what your food is for the day. Don't go for the worst thing. Look, what can I do something healthy? Make it a game. So to me, the sustainability and the thing is to have that level of minimal actions that you can take over and over. People are different. right? How do they remember their habits? Some people love habit stacking, some people are tracking people. But I always say, let's just build them until a habit that you've chosen becomes second nature.
Yeah.
Like, and I
Yeah.
think eating, to be, like I said, eating slowly is a great one. And the same with wellness, right? Same with
Well,
wellness.
I love that you said you're talking about slowing down when it comes to eating. And I'd already made a note before you said anything about talking about eating standing up. I think there are so many people who eat standing up. I was on a Zoom call the other day for lunch, and there were two people on the call that were just like running around their kitchen, with their screen on, like making their lunch and eating standing up. And I thought to myself, like, oh, like, please, like, sit down. You're making me a nervous wreck. But yes, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of times, excuses that I hear will be, is when it comes to nutrition, will be surrounding, how much time it takes. I don't have time to be in the kitchen, or I don't have time to make my own meals. And I want to sort of relate this back. I'll come back full circle to this, but I have a 5-year-old who I think does pretty well for her range of what she eats. I know a lot of my friends struggle with 5-year-olds, and they're toddlers who are just really picky, and they don't want to eat vegetables. I think my 5-year-old does a pretty good job. And people have asked me a lot recently. I actually have a Facebook group called Creating Healthy Kids, where I share a lot of tips in there. But people ask me about it. They're like, how do you get her to eat that? Like, how is she eating spaghetti squash for dinner? And I'm like, well, for me, like the biggest thing that I have seen for her is when she has a hand, like, and I mean, literally when she has a hand in her food, when she is helping me carve out the squash, or she's helping me chop up a salad. We have some, child safe knives and stuff like that. Like when she's helping me make dinner, she's more inclined to try it and eat it and have it almost like an emotional bond with it. And I remember 13 years ago when my husband and I were starting out on our exercise journey, we were also embracing this concept of clean nutrition, which for us was, we had come from a background of Hamburger Helper and box taco dinners, right? And so we were like, what is this? Like, first of all, we didn't even know what half of the vegetables were, and secondly, we were like, how do we prepare these? Like, this is so foreign to us. But at the same time, doing it and sort of just saying, like, this is what I want for myself. I want to be healthier. I want to have more energy. And to put our hands in the food, to make that, to take the time, even if it's, I mean, a lot of times, for those of you listening, it doesn't take as long as you might think, right? Just like with exercise, you think you want to work out an hour to an hour and a half. I'm guaranteeing that even just 30 minutes of movement is going to make a huge difference. Same thing goes for your nutrition. I tell my clients, if it means a rotisserie chicken is on the menu, use the rotisserie chicken, pull it apart, put it on top of a salad with a bunch of greens, some cherry tomatoes. You will be better off for it, as opposed to something from the fast food drive-through or something that's, easy to pick up. So I love this idea of slowing down. I love when you said your BAMs. I love that, because my husband and I always say, we try to stick to the way we eat. I mean, we definitely have food sensitivities in our house, so that helps keep us on track for the most part, because we don't consume certain things. But when we go on vacations, I think I'm going to start referring to our vacations as our BAMs. Like, I love that you just said that, because it's like, okay, I don't have a lot of control here. I can have some groceries with me, but at the same time, I'm going to be eating out. I've got to make decisions. I love that concept. That's so amazing. I'm definitely going to be stealing that from you and using that when I'm talking to my clients as well. But so in your experience in working with people and really sort of teaching them this way of living and this overall sort of long-term vision for their health, what do you think, if you had to say that there's one habit that would make the most difference for them, what would you say that is?
In addition to eating slowly, because to me that's just the foundation, is add more vegetables to every meal, and make it fun. I love that you have your daughter cooking with you, because you're right, getting your hands in there. People often think that meal prep means, and again, this is going back to the Instagram thing. If you're on Instagram, I see those people with and sorry, anyone who does it, come to my house, please, have spread out across the counter, all those little glass containers. They don't even use plastic because it's not good for you. And it has every meal for the week. And just, I'm like, whoa. I want everyone to move away from the idea that has to be meal prep. Start with what's easiest.
Yeah.
Starts with what's easiest for meal prep. And for one of my clients, meal prep is simply having healthier foods to grab out of the fridge if she's super busy on a phone call.
Yep,
and she
same.
can't eat mindfully when she's working in the afternoon, but she can avoid grabbing the really high calorie, nutrient less and undense food. I talk about volume eating, right? I think so. Maybe when I say add vegetables, it's volume eat. Eat so you're full and you won't feel so restricted of high nutrient, high density, lower calorie food. And that happens to be plants for the most part. Summer's coming. What I love is if you have the ability to sign up for one of those CSA boxes, the community farm boxes, you're supporting a small farmer, and they come with recipes. I mean, I got one once and it had something in there that I'd never seen. I think it was kohlrabi or something. And then you can have some fun, right? You go on the internet, everybody looks up a recipe and comes up with a way to prepare that. Just really becoming a little more plant forward. And you talked about restriction earlier, right? If you restrict your eating and you're probably eating too little anyway, I think if most people look back and look back and then look forward to when they then didn't eat the way they wanted and they didn't follow any of their rules, it's probably because they've been in a period of restriction. So I even have a program. I've worked with clients that they have a wedding coming up and they want to be in a specific weight or shape. I get it. We've all been there. But if you're going to do something like that, I think you need to be working with someone to have what I call is the blueprint for sustainability. How do you take that period of training, maybe you're training for an event, and so you're eating very specifically, and turn that back into normal life and not drop everything. And so that's a little bit where some of my sustainability ideas come from working with clients who have specific goals, fitness goals, maybe even run a marathon, who are being very strict, and then seeing them once they've dropped that, once they've reached that goal, not knowing what to do, and continuing on with habits that they can keep going with.
Yeah, that's something that I actually addressed on one of my previous podcast episodes with NPC bodybuilder Mindy Irish. She's a natural bodybuilder. And one of the reasons why I was very selective in having her on the podcast was because I've watched her for years, and I've noticed that her way of eating is a sustainable way of eating. So she might do some more intense, I'll call it restriction, when it comes around her show time, but she doesn't spend the day after her show, binging Pizza Hut and donuts and all that kind of stuff, right? Like she's like, I see a lot of bodybuilders do. So I love that. I love, finding a way that works for you in the long term is going to be key for everyone. When you were talking about the meal prep idea, right? It doesn't always have to be the glass containers with the boring chicken, broccoli, and rice, right? Like sometimes for me, it's the same way when you were talking about your client. For me, it's, do I have pre-cut fruits and veggies available in my refrigerator so that if I'm hungry, I'm going to stop and get baby carrots or chunked up watermelon, or I'm going to have something that is, healthy, as opposed to grabbing something from the pantry or grabbing something on the go when I'm out and about that's not going to serve me. So I have this analogy, and I think I've shared it before, but in case I haven't, I heard a nutritionist, it was actually a doctor of nutrition talking, this was a dozen years ago, about nutrition in general. And he talked about, if I were to give you a banana and you were like, oh, I'm pretty hungry, that sounds good, and you eat the banana. And he said, what if I gave you another banana? He's like, what are the odds that you would want two bananas? Right. And you're like, probably never really had two bananas before. Like, that's a lot. My kids like bananas, but I don't know if they like them that much, And then he said, well, what if I give you a McDonald's French fry? And he was like, what happens after that? Do you want another one? Yes. Do you want another one? Yes. Do you want another one? Yes. So we have to look at it from, I always like to say, the foods that God made, right? The foods that are whole foods, like a banana. It's going to satiate certain nutritional things in your body that you need in a way that your body doesn't need more. It doesn't want more. When you have the French fry, it's, of course, we can talk about all the different things, the hydrogenated oils and all the things that are there. It's created, just like a lot of packaged product, to get you to eat more. If you've ever had the thought, gosh, why is this bag of chips really only half full? When you buy a bag of chips, right? There's a reason. They want you to buy more than one bag of chips, right? And those chips are intended to keep you hungrier. So a lot of times I have a woman that I worked with years ago, and she would say, I just really struggle because I snack a lot. And she would be like kind of a constant snacker, where she would eat some Cheez-It crackers for lunch, or she would have just little treats here and there. And she was like, I don't know why I keep gaining weight, because I just have these little snacks all day. I don't overeat. And I'm thinking to myself, like, well, there's nutritional probably deficiencies. There's your body craves a certain level of not only macro, but micronutrients. And when you're not giving your body that, it's going to just continue to crave and continue to snack, which is, again, not serving you. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I want to make sure that we spend a little bit of time talking about women specifically. Obviously, this podcast is geared toward hormone health, and I like to help women when it comes to not just fat loss, but also just in how their body feels. I know when we were having sort of our little chat a couple weeks ago, we talked about, this sort of barrier that comes up for a lot of women sometimes when there is a hormone imbalance at play for them. Sometimes they'll say, well, I am exercising, or I am eating relatively clean, and I'm not seeing that, weight come off, or I'm not feeling much better. So what would you say to that woman? And let's start diving into hormones.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely, I would recommend a program like yours to start to understand where your hormones are. It is, and this is what you live. It is so difficult to get many doctors to even take a look at that for you. It throughout your life. I'm on the other end of that. I'm menopausal, and a lot of my clients are peri and menopausal, and doctors will just like, oh yeah, you're just going to gain some weight. I think help understanding the science behind it and understanding that some changes in your diet, as well as things like supplementation and exercising in line with your body, will make such a difference. And one of the biggest things I think for women and hormones, and you've talked about it a lot, is stress.
Yes.
We're stressed because no one's listening to us, right? We're having hot flashes, or we're having PMS. Everybody, just live with it, right? So that adds stress on top of all the rest. So, hormone wise, yes, absolutely. And a lot of the things we've just talked about, your nutrition and eating whole foods, have a positive impact on your hormones. All these things sort of come together to help us be healthier and help us get past all of those things where nature's kind of, fighting against us. We're the caregiver, we're putting ourselves last, our hormones are crazy, and that the whole thing's stressing us out. And when you're in that place, it's really hard to focus and get well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always say that the number two, or the top two things that I see that contribute to hormone imbalance in women, or just this sort of weight loss stagnation, almost always comes to blood sugar fluctuation, or cortisol, right? Stress, how
Yep.
women are dealing with stress. And just like you said, like if you're in a constant state of stress, that doesn't always have to look like career stress. It doesn't always have to look like that. It could be environmental stress. It could be environmental toxins. It could be a lot of excess estrogens in your environment or in your food. Like there's a lot of different things that could be playing into your stress, let alone perimenopause, menopause, and all the things that happens as we get older and our adrenals start to take over for our hormone production. And so, stress, number one, for sure. Like I said, it doesn't matter what type of stress it is. If your body is in some sort of stress, and by the way, for the woman listening who's like me, exercise is also a form of stress. And so if you're someone who is exercising 6 or 7 days a week, it could be that your body needs less in order to see results. So there's all different kinds of stressors. And until we can kind of get a hold of that, and we can kind of say, okay, I'm going to make sure that I'm, first of all, getting that lab work to see what your cortisol levels are. And I don't just mean a one-time blood draw. I'm talking like a 24-hour, saliva collection to look at what your cortisol is doing from the morning to the night, see if it's on the right track. Once we have that type of testing, we'll be able to see how your body is handling stress. But from there, getting that stress under control could be ultimately what's keeping your body sort of holding on to that fat. Same thing goes for blood sugar fluctuations. I mean, you kind of alluded to it earlier. Most women are not eating enough. And I know that there's going to be somebody listening that's like, oh, that's not me. Trust me, I'm telling you, I look at a lot of food diaries. There are a lot of women out there who are not eating enough, and they're not eating enough of the right foods. So they might be eating processed food, whatever, but like their breakfast, like people will laugh at me when I tell them I have 6 tablespoons of egg whites and a whole egg scrambled in with broccoli. This morning I had some turkey sausage in there. I had a paleo waffle. I have like a breakfast, you know what I mean? It was funny because when I was in college, people used to say, you're quite an eater. And I'm like, no, I feel like I'm fueling my metabolism, but I think a lot of women are not eating enough. And so and they're especially not eating enough of proteins and fats, which is the sort of satiating foods, right? Those are the foods that are going to help you feel fuller longer. And so the crackers or you know, whatever, the cereal, those types of those things aren't going to keep your energy up. They're just going to give you a sugar high followed by a crash. And so when we see blood sugar fluctuations or stress as part of a woman's MO, like if that's happening for you, there's nothing that you can do in the world of exercise or anything else that's going to change that until you get those under control.
Absolutely.
I just finished a series of solo rounds on what I call the 4 fundamentals of hormone balance. Those are my pillars. And we talked about how, you know, we talk about sleep, supplementation, nutrition, and exercise. But the exercise component is such a small piece of that pie, you know, and I always tell women, I want you to get a better hold on your sleep, your unique deficiencies and supplementation for that, and your food before you even embrace exercise. Because you could be, you know, you can't out exercise a bad diet. If you're not fueling enough, then that exercise is actually going to do the opposite of what you're wanting it to do. And so I just kind of got on a soapbox, but I wanted to make sure that I said that because I think there are women out there who don't understand how good their bodies are designed to feel. And until they start eating enough and they kind of get their stress and their blood sugar in check, they're not going to see that weight loss drop.
Yeah, absolutely. I get on the same soapbox all the time with people. And I have a pyramid that I like to use. And at the very top is actually exercise. And by that, I mean, I love, by that, I mean purposeful exercise, going to the gym. I always tell people, look, NEAT is NEAT, right? The non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is, you know, the fancy word for just stand up every minute and walk more. You know, if you have a step tracker, use that thing as opposed to worrying about, I need to get to the gym or I'm not going to lose weight. Absolutely not. I totally agree with you. I've always said you've got to get your sleep right and get your stress right. I always tell people, you know, that especially women my age, you tend to start gaining weight around your middle. It's weird. It leaves your butt where you needed it for, and your body's so smart, right? Fat in your rear and your thighs is the fat stored for childbearing. Fat around your middle is where it moves. But I tell people it's really because first you need more fat stores, as you said, to generate your estrogen. As you get older, that's where it's coming from, because you don't have that anymore from your reproductive organs. And if you're under a level of stress, I would say your body thinks a tiger's chasing you because you're sitting on the couch grinding your teeth. But the tiger never comes. So what happened when you were a cave woman, the tiger came and you ran and it released all that cortisol, right? Everything released and your body went back to normal. But now the tiger's not coming. And so your body thinks there's always tigers. And it puts the fat close to your liver where the fat can be converted into energy in case that tiger comes one day. So it's just this huge cycle of, you know, gaining weight and having fat where your body needs it. Your body's smart. Yeah. So you need to reduce those other things. Definitely.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I always say that, you know, as we get older, as we get closer to 40s and beyond, our adrenal glands, which are these tiny glands that sit above our kidneys, they start to make more of our sex hormones and the ovaries produce less. Well, your adrenals just also so happen to be in charge of your stress response. And so if they're already carrying your stress, and then all of a sudden they're being extra stressed because now they're also producing your sex hormones, and you decide that you're going to just exercise harder, or you're going to eat less, or you're going to cut those carbs, again, you're working against your physiology. And so as we get older, we do start to see the weight come more into our belly, right? Or come into those hips and thighs, because we're starting to deal with things like estrogen dominance. We're starting to deal with this sort of the repercussions of these adrenals taking over. So I just want women listening to hear this, you know, and I realize that there are trainers, personal trainers out there who will disagree with me, that it's a hill they will die on, but it's also a hill I will die on. So I'll go head to head. It is not the same for men as it is for women. It is not a calories in, calories out game. Our hormones are not constant. And because of that, we have to look at that when it comes to women's health. This has been such a fun interview. Gosh, we could go on and on about nutrition and habits and everything else. I know that you have a program that you're running over the summer. I want to make sure I give you time to talk about what you're doing. And if you could just go ahead and point people in the direction of where you are and how they can find you.
Sure. Yeah. I usually do 12-week programs, but I decided to do an 8-week group coaching session because it's summer, right? So it's kind of a little quicker and really action packed. And it's really 8 weeks of what I'm calling finding wellness in the new normal. We're hopefully almost post COVID. And I think things are just different. People are working from home. I'm finding as people are able to be together, and summertime brings that too, right? We can be outside, that we're kind of throwing things to the wind. It's a little bit of this yay celebration all the time. And so this 8 weeks is focused on some habits you can start practicing to keep things under control. So we're going to focus on my foundation nutritional habits. We're going to talk about travel wellness and how to maybe use BAMs, for example, for work or fun travel this summer. We're going to talk about perfectionism and start to work on that. And really interestingly, from what we just talked about, everybody who does the program is going to get a personalized sleep, stress, and recovery plan. I just think that is so important, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And if someone's interested in joining the group, which starts on May 30th, all the information's on my website, which is Living Well with Karen Holden. And you can sign up there, or you can just sign up for a call with me to talk more about that program or other things I do.
Excellent. I love that. I think what you have to offer is so needed, and I will definitely be pointing some people in your direction. I'm going to be linking all of this up in the show notes so you guys can have easy access to the link she just provided. And that way you guys can get a hold of her if needed. Karen, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I am so glad our paths crossed. I know this won't be the last time we talk. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.